Kia ora, and welcome to the first episode of Career Spark, a podcast bringing you some incredible New Zealanders from all walks of life. Today, we have the face and co-founder of LetsPlay.Live, Australasia's biggest and most iconic esports organisation. He's an icon of esports everywhere, and he's not slowing down now. In this episode, we talk about the mentality of always saying yes, his secondary education, and how he came to form the organisation that is LPL. Right now, let's get into the episode with Duane Mutu. Okay, first off, Duane, I want to thank you for being here. So from a video game and esports fans, it was really exciting for me to actually be able to talk to you, to someone who lives and breathes and really observes the esports universe. So I am super keen to get into LetsPlay.Live, but I did want to start by going back to the beginning. So if my research is correct, so you came from Long Bay College, whose motto is, and you might remember this, personal experience for global success. So which, by the way, I think you've definitely fulfilled. And so just to go back to the start, how did you feel when it came to secondary education? Like, we were at the top of the class? Did you kind of not fare as well? Just want to kind of get right to that.
Yeah, look, it's great. Many people, and it's super crazy that you know about LBC. It was like, it's known as LBC for those out there. Long Bay College, for people who don't know on the podcast, is actually on the between the Hibiscus Coast and the north of the North Shore, and it's been developed now. But back then, it was kind of this somewhat of a rural kind of school. It was like the kind of one that didn't quite fit into the North Shore schools. It was sort of the outpost, an outlier, and it had farmland all the way around it. And I happened to go there. So I have a twin brother, and the bus, I lived in Browns Bay, and the bus would stop outside my house. And we didn't have a lot of money growing up, so mum was just like, that's the easiest way. That's why I ended up at Long Bay, at LBC. And look, the school, when I got there for the first couple of years, and it changed a lot, it morphed. That was a decile, like it was a really low decile school. So people now that might know, it's like, oh, that's a flash school. Back in my day, honestly, there was a uniform, but no one ever wore a uniform. People were sunbathing on roofs. It was very interesting. Let's just say that, without giving away too many secrets, for those who were there will know. And so, from a personal point of view, that's why I ended up at Long Bay. Education was always somewhat important, but I didn't have an end goal of kind of like, I need to go to uni or I go to trade, and that's part of the times, I think, but also my upbringing. Like, no one in my kind of wider whānau had ever really been to uni, so no one had ever been like, this is how you do school. So it was always in the moment. And to a point, was I good at school? Look, I'd say I was, definitely not the top of the class, but I certainly was. I was certainly, from middle to upper kind of always. So I was always diligent, always worked really hard, and became actually the deputy head boy of that school. So I mean, obviously that probably shows that I was kind of well-rounded, and I was in one of the years I was sportsman of the year. So it was kind of like I did really well in the sense of I was, a key contributor to a school, was good in class, ended up with an A bursary. So for what that's worth, in this day and age, that gave us entry to law school, med school. Like, that was kind of like the top grade you could get. So, but I was never really at school heaps. I always say to people, like, I was never there heaps as far as I went to school, always diligently, but because of sport and extracurricular activity, particularly in my final year of school, I was at sports events a lot, like, first 15 or basketball tournaments. So I probably didn't do a bunch, but I would always do very well, and I would study and I'd work really hard and do well in exams. And so that's how schooling was. So it was a cool school. It was kind of diverse. We didn't have a lot of money, but there was a few that did. And so it gave us a good eclectic kind of background. And the school did well enough. And then, and I was, I would say, relatively successful if you take in those considerations of kind of education and cultural and sporting kind of accolades. Then, it was a good school for me.
Awesome. Okay, and so yeah, I mean, so it sounds like you've done well across the board. Like, yes, obviously sportsman, and obviously to be deputy head boy, your academics have to be pretty up, and then obviously your values, you've got to be a pretty good person as well. And so you mentioned that your whānau hadn't gone to university, and so was that kind of an inspiration essentially to then move on and study a Bachelor of Arts at the University of Auckland?
Well, yeah, that's a funny, and again, these are great questions because no one's really ever explored it too much, right? Like, so I get this, like, I literally didn't know, and this is like nowadays, it's great to see in the schooling systems, which I'm actually really passionate about, not only for my own kids, but whoever I'm around, is we had one career advisor, right? And they'd do this kind of token keyboard thing where you put in your favorite things and it would pump out 3 things that you might want to be. Congratulations, you should go into journalism or you should whatever.
Yeah.
So we didn't really have this proper pathway. And so I basically left school with no idea about what I wanted to do. Zero.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so, but of course, I had gone, man, I'm going to do something. It wasn't like I was just going to be lazy and do stuff, but I was like, really wanted to do something, but I didn't have any, we didn't have any money. Like, we were really, really poor. So I lost a lot of opportunities like that. I didn't know what to do about university. I wasn't really a tradie, and I didn't have enough money to go traveling. So I was kind of like, I'm just going to get a part-time job. Like, all I really wanted was some money in the bank after school, because I just always had these commitments. So I left school. Yeah. I get some part-time job just to be like, cool, I'm finally going to earn a couple of $100 a week. And for people who don't come from money, you realize like that's massive money, right? Like, and so I did that. And I actually luckily bumped into the careers advisor from school, and I was surfing and working and doing some stuff. And this is over the school holidays, between my last year of school and heading into what would be the first year of uni. And she's like, well, how did you go at bursary? And I said, I got an A, for what that's worth. And she was like, you got an A, like that's a massive deal. What are you going to do? You're going to be a doctor or a lawyer? Like, you can do whatever you want. And I was like, yeah. I don't think I'm going to uni. I don't have the money to go to uni. I don't know. And she said, no, come up and see me. She happened to be working for Massey University up there in Albany. Okay, which is near the school. Yep. She actually was the one who pulled me in and said, look, and explained to me that you don't need money, you can get a loan, like you will get some money as a student allowance if your parents can't afford, and you can do some stuff. So I literally did that. I was like, well, that seems as good as anything. So she took me through some course and said, what do you want to do? And I was like, well, I'm not really too sure, but that's how I ended up starting my arts degree, and that's literally, and I lasted 6 months at Massey University, got serious about what I was doing. Like, in other words, like, oh, okay, cool, I'm in uni, so I'm going to be a uni student. I got 4 years of this, and I didn't like it there because it was too easy. The subjects weren't that challenging that I chose, right? Because I probably chose like, oh, that seems fun. So I actually left and went to Auckland University and enrolled in law. And what people don't know is I spent a number of years actually doing LLB, as well as my arts degree. And so I ended up at Auckland University for 3 years doing law and arts at the same time. So I was doing like I said, I kind of got committed to being a uni student. So if you're going to do something, you always want to be the best, right? Like, my position is, like, when I say the best you, rather than competitively in the sense of, because you may be brighter than me, but I've just got to be best I can be, otherwise wasting time. And so I just was like, right, if I'm going to go, I'm going to do law, right? Like, that's what I'm going to do. So, so that's helped me. But that's actually my journey into, university. And then once I left, I didn't finish law school. And it's always sort of stuck with me that it seems like a failure, but actually what's kind of come out of it is what we see in today's society is a lot of it, and without getting into too much detail, I think on this podcast, is what we are seeing now around passive racism, the woke movement, that sort of stuff. That was real and prevalent back then for me. Like, that was real. Like, I'd go there, and it was so funny because I'd had this A bursary, and it's funny to talk about it now. But people would be like, oh, so did you get one of the quota spots? Like, is that why you're here? It's like, what's a quota spot, man? Like, straight up, like this kind of like language is like, what's a quota spot? Like, and they're like, like, because you're Māori or whatever, you get a spot in law. And I'm like, what? No, I did school and I got in. Like, I'm not sure about all the rest of what you're talking about. And so I just wasn't feeling it. And so I wanted to finish something because I thought it would have been a cop out to not. So I completed the arts degree and then left Auckland University.
Okay. And then so from that, Bachelor of Arts, kind of partial law, so you have an understanding of law. You got pretty good idea with that. Then what was your first job outside of that? So once degree is finished, what was your first kind of role? Essentially. So
my thing was going back to, and it's always about to why you're really asking the questions, which are great, is around the genesis of kind of concepts. So sometimes it's like, some people would have had this far more planned. Mine was an evolutionary tale, right? Like, it just kind of evolved. But once I got into uni and I started kind of working, and I got into what I perceive as a bit more of the real world, in the sense of I had left, the kind of the confines of where I came from. And the reason I say the confines is because I didn't, finally had transportation. I had a little bit of money. I was seeing different people rather than just a kind of sporting circle. So my world was opening up. And all I ever wanted to do was travel. I had never been on a plane. Like I'd really never been on a plane. And so all I wanted to do was kind of in my mind as I wanted to surf and snowboard, play some sport, and travel the world. Like that's kind of what I wanted to do. Like as in I just wanted to see other cultures and other people. And so as soon as I finished, there was no thought again about, oh, I should probably get a job that kind of can help my degree progress. It was more like, I've got this degree, I'll tuck it away. That's good that I completed my task and departmentalized in a way. And then I was like, right, I'm just saving my money. And I did 3 jobs and I saved up and I got myself, I was working when everyone was drinking. And that's, I guess, the discipline that I have is like everyone was partying at uni, everyone wanted to do it. And for the final 18 months, I worked before uni, during uni, like where I'd slot in slots. And then I'd go work in a liquor store from like 7 p.m. at night to about 1 in the morning. And I do that like 7 days a week almost. And then I was just populating, money, right, to be able to go traveling. So I got my tickets and I went to the Gold Coast, Asia, and then up to London. And that was the end goal, right? Like take a couple of trips. And that's really the journey I took. And once I landed in London, my very first job was watering plants inside high rises. That was my very first job.
Wow. Okay. So
2 weeks off the plane. And I say 2 weeks, right? So one of the big things that I've learned and I think it's really, upbringing, people will look at it and go, man, that dude maybe seemingly had it tougher than others. But I've always said to people, I had it great, right? Because what it taught you was, you get resilience. Everything's for you. You have to do this for yourself. So, and this is probably a foreign concept to some people, is like when I left home, I wasn't sure when I was coming home. Mm-hmm. I didn't know whether I'd have enough money to call my parents back home or my mom and then my dad, but they're separated. And I didn't know if anything went wrong. And I literally had about $1,000 when I turned up in England. That's it. So if I don't get a job, if I need to fly home, I don't even have enough for a ticket to get home, right? It's not even £1,000. Mm-hmm. And so you are really imagine an environment like that. We just put you out there and say, sink or swim, like someone to do that. And so it taught me straight away, right? I've got to work. Like my mates are turning up there and they could do whatever the heck they want and they can do it. But for me, I had to work. So I just was like, I'll do anything. And I just was literally like walking around for about, after the first 5 days of landing there. And I literally just picked up this job. Guy said, yeah, look, you can water. I'll give you some pound and you just do that. And I was like, cool, that's what I'm going to do. And that was my very first job. But that wasn't the kind of end. It was never like seen as like, that's going to be the end goal. But again, I wasn't trying to find something in the region. But then the real kickoff towards where we'd end up long term is I was lucky enough I started looking for what I call a corporate job. And my real corporate job after that was for a company called PJ Smoothies. And PJ Smoothies was primarily Charlie's Drinks in New Zealand before Charlie's was a real thing. And so they made smoothies in a bottle and they had juices and that was like a real new thing. And I was there for about 9 months to a year. A really cool upstart kind of company. I was just a baby doing PR marketing, whatever they needed, lugging boxes. And that company got bought by PepsiCo. So it was the first time, unbeknownst to me, I saw an acquisition or a merger. And that was a really kind of crazy thing. Then I went to Europe with my redundancy. They basically walked in and said, hey, we'll leave it. Like, congratulations, we're sold. Here's your redundancy. If you want a job, turn up on Monday morning up in a different office at Pepsi. Or we'll see you later because, obviously everyone's going to go take their money and all the senior management left. I went to Europe, surfed, came back, and a friend of mine from the Gold Coast, because I'd always been into surfing and action sports, was working for Mambo Surfwear. Do you remember Mambo, the clothing brand?
Yeah, like
I think. Yeah, many moons ago, right? So way back. And they were launching in the UK. And a friend of mine said, look, I'm coming up from Aussie. There's a CFO and a CEO and me. And we're going to launch this brand in the UK. Do you want in on it? And I said, yeah, I'll come back from Europe. And I went and worked for that company. And that company went from 4 of us to about 120 in the space of 2 years in London. And I got to, and I was very lucky that I went from packing boxes to opening up retail stores to repping on the road to, anything. And you imagine just being that guy they just plug in and just get to do stuff. And I was just keen to work. And so with those two those two businesses in particular, seeing the acquisition and also a business of growth into Europe, and it would become like this, kind of large business. They weren't mine, but I saw, and years later, as I talked to you about this is what started the journey about all the things I wanted to do into my life corporately. But I was very lucky that those are my two kind of really meaningful jobs in my time in London, and my first job being watering plants.
Okay. And so currently with Mambo, so how old are you now?
So because I was quite young going to uni, because I was younger in my year. So when I finished uni and went overseas, I was 21, and I'd done my 4 years. So I was about 22 when I was working for like 22 to 20, so 21 to 23. I was kind of working in those jobs.
Okay. Cool. And so then I guess obviously it's quite a big jump from being over in Europe, then back to New Zealand and working with, I think, let me see. Oh, sorry, just from memory, from Monaco.
Yeah.
How did those kind of work out? How did you end up coming back to New Zealand and working for those guys?
Yep. So again, the journey is always, and I say this to everyone that young and wants to listen, even staff in mine. You can train people in roles, right? Like unless you're a very specialist, right? Like a surgeon or whatever, you can train people. What you can't train is people who want to get up and they want to work hard. And they're respectful, and that goes a long way. Like people, this day and age is too much of this kind of nonchalant, I should be the CEO today, tomorrow. It's like, no, I just do whatever, I'll work hard. And so that's always been the evolution. So when I got back home to New Zealand, I just, again, got off the plane, wanted to do these cool jobs, couldn't find one, and I went out and I started repping hardware, tools, like hammers, nails, just because that's all I could do. And as I was looking around, I ended up working for Globe Surf and Skate. So I was actually there and ended up being there quite a long time. And in that journey, I was in there basically, we were kind of had Globe, and we had Obey and Stussy and a lot of these kind of fashion labels. And it was just, okay, this person, and at that point, people kind of, oh, this person works in a kind of youth action sport area. And I got tapped on the shoulder by someone who I knew was working this big company called Monaco. And they were a massive CE business, and they had Panasonic, they had Higher Whitewear, and their job was really just distributing those brands. And they had a brand, they had Casio. And Casio is a Japanese brand, as you know, most people recognize them from the watches, right? G-Shock and stuff. And they picked up the Nintendo GameCube. So I get this message saying, you're a youth guy, you know things about the youth industry. So people pigeonhole you, right? Like as you're going through, and they're like, you're working with these cool guys for like surfers, skatey stuff. This is probably up the alleyway. And I was like, maybe. And then I went there, interviewed, and thought, I'm really keen on a change because I'd spent years doing Mambo and Globe, and I was like, I'll get into it. And then when they said the role is actually in video gaming, you're going to be launching, like being part of the Nintendo GameCube and the gaming division. I'm like, interesting. And I was never a gamer. So everyone always has the perception that I was an ex-pro gamer. But I would say I was not a gamer in the sense of, one, we played a heck of a lot of spaces. When we were growing up, fish and chip shops, like me and my cousins, back to how we grew up, going back to that, we were jamming fish and chip shops, Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter. That's just how we lived. And we'd go to play League and then just go play spaces. And then we had a master system. So don't get me wrong, it wasn't like I wasn't gaming, but it's just all we had in those days. Like that was just how I learned, but I wasn't hardcore. Then I go, because of my background in youth kind of business, or a specialist within kind of those kind of realms, and the job was to market the Nintendo GameCube and games, and that's how I started. And that's the first, and then within a couple of years, that division would go on to be huge. We would represent Warner, Disney, EA, Sega, THQ before it was gone, Ubisoft, Total, the whole lot. And so in that office with me, funnily enough, and this has always been the what do you call it, the foundation blocks of my gaming, was that we went from nothing, like as in a company of just launching a GameCube, to representing the biggest brands on earth, and went from selling a couple of hundred discs to 100,000 Call of Duty copies in a day. So we were right there. Timing was everything, right? It was just everything. Warner and Disney hadn't even got into interactive at that point, and we were the first to be representing them around the world. So I was like, that's the foundation. Equally, in that office was pretty much names now that have gone on and still are the heads of those gaming divisions in Asia Pacific. People like Mike Kolodensky is like pretty much the leader of Ubisoft. Chris is over there, so heads up Sony New Zealand. Ben Ward, Ant Ward, like these people are all very senior in the industry, and we were all working together as this kind of wild collection of people learning how to be in the video gaming industry.
Awesome. So just to kind of, I guess, essentially wrap up what we've been talking about. So a lot of kind of the jobs and opportunities that you've had have just kind of been from you saying, yeah, let's do it. Let's give it a go. Let's work. So things, yeah. So kind of throwing it back to things like Mambo, and then now obviously with Monaco, it's a lot of you just saying yes, let's give it a go. Saying yes to the opportunity. Does that sound
absolutely
right?
It's almost my motto. My
Great
motto,
motto.
whether
It's
it's
a great
to
motto
like
to
it's a
have.
great motto. You must say yes. Like right, everyone has fear. Everyone has concerns. If you overthink things, I'm like a massive believer. Only because if you think, and I've only touched on it, although it might feel like an eternity that I'm talking. It's you think about the way I was brought up is like you are either optimistic in life or you're pessimistic. And obviously for me, I've always been, man, what's the worst that can happen to me, right? Like no money, or I've been there, like okay,
Yeah.
So it's always yes, and it's like sliding doors. I say to people, what is the worst that can happen apart from you learn something? If you say yes to something and walk through the door, then it should open up another at least two doors for you. Good, bad, middle, and it might open up way more. So my motto is, you're right, is well picked up. Is always it's yes. Be brave in your decisions. Trust your instincts because your instincts are usually right. People don't do enough in business and instincts because it sounds hippie and whatever, but you trust your instincts. You know what's good. You know what works for you. You know what you like, and you say yes. And by saying yes, you put yourself in a position that you can go forward, but you ain't going to go backwards because you're in the moment now, right? Like if someone gave you an opportunity now, Caleb, or whoever's listening, you say yes to that, you've gone at least forward some way. Otherwise, you're going to be sitting back here talking to me, and you're already there, so you don't need that. So it's very much a yes always in everything you do, and I preach that to my team, and I live by that motto in business now.
I think it's an incredible motto to have. I think just saying yes to every opportunity that kind of walks through the door is an incredible motto, for sure. And okay, so from Monaco, you then moved to Juice TV, and then you were kind of very much a gaming host, right?
Yes.
Mm.
So I was a gaming host. I'll let you continue. Sorry, though. Yes.
Oh, no, you're good.
Yeah.
I was just going to ask, I guess, essentially what that entailed and how you kind of moved from Monaco to Juice TV.
Yeah. So I had, obviously that's why it's really important to understand the action sports background. And then I'm like you said, Monaco, and we're dealing with games and launching games. And one of the fun facts is, and I'll let you tidbit that, is have a look at if you Google Splinter Cell, that was like kind of like the good and bad of what I did once at Monaco, which is we shut down the viaduct accidentally, by the way. And my saying at the time was it was marketing gone wrong, and so that was a bad thing. That was Splinter Cell, and so we're kind of really at the forefront of all that stuff, good and bad, around launching games. And I wanted to change, but through that journey, I was actually presenting, to your point, I was a gaming host. So people like at Juice, I ended up doing some media stuff to one of those points. Hey, you'll be all right. Do you want to have a turn? I'm like, yes. Okay. Why not? What's the worst? Right? Like point the camera, we'll have a go. And it was one of those. And then I ended up presenting gaming and doing it as a host and doing some other stuff within the network and other networks. And then I pivoted because I wanted to create a TV channel. So through that evolution of having a studio, access to Juice TV and the family, we created Garage TV. And so some people will remember that was a 24-hour action sport TV channel on Sky, first of its kind. And that's how that all came together, because I'd been in action sports, I was doing gaming and gaming hosting, knew the family, and we had a studio, and we turned it on. And that's how I ended up across there full-time doing the whole garage and surfing TV thing.
Okay, that's awesome. Yeah, and once again, like you said, just saying yes to the opportunities.
Yeah, and it is a yes thing, and then that's how we ultimately evolved into. And this is really the yes, is how we evolved into what you would end up seeing as Let's Play Live today. And so I'll tell that story because I think it's kind of a good summary of all this kind of, world that I was moving in. So we're making action sports content. No one is thinking about the content of esports apart from very few across the globe. That's not to say that people weren't doing esports as a community endeavor, but they weren't thinking about the content of esports, which would be known as kind of like esports before Twitch and those types of things are coming on board. And so, interestingly, I say this somewhat as in third person, probably somewhat the right person because I had access to a studio. I had many years, over 12 years in the video game publisher side, and I knew how to make kind of content. And Sky TV asked us, do you know about e-gaming? So they called it e-gaming. And at that time, and some will remember this if they're historians of esports, of course, Korea was doing its thing, but ESPN had just come out with something called Heroes of the Storm. First time NCAA on ESPN, it was like obviously Heroes of the Storm national championship, like you see of football and basketball over there. Sky had got wind of that, seen it, I had seen it, and they were like, would you be able to do it? And they had no idea about my background in gaming. So they said, would you do that? And I was like, in my mind, I'm going, like the one side, like the mind is telling me, you are crazy. No one's done this. Like there's no blueprint. Like no one makes live in these sports. It's crazy stuff. And I said, and of course I said, nodded at them and said, yeah, we can do that. Yeah, no worries. Like work it out later. And then we ended up making the NZGC, which was the New Zealand Gaming Championships with the best League of Legends players. And we put it live on Sky TV. And at that time, it was the third televised esports broadcast in the world. And so
super early.
And so we're talking about cool stories where people came into that studio. We flew everyone up from around the country, and no one had seen these people's faces, right? This is pre kind of almost gaming. Like these are the best players, and they only knew you by your gaming A-list, and they whispered to me like, hey, is that like Caleb X45? Oh my gosh. I'm like, yep, that's him. And so it was just this kind of really crazy melting pot. Shock was there, who had gone to play, he's playing for Direwolves. You got a bunch have gone over to the US within that kind of collection. So it was super cool to see really early. But man, we're talking about, we had no access to publisher. We had no access to internet. We're talking about wires dangled. We had so much risk. You think about it, League of Legends just go for an update, it could have shut down. This is how early it was. But it was a yes, and we'll be brave, and we did it. And that would be the genesis of, creating a business in esports.
Like that's incredible, like super early as well. And I guess kudos to kind of Sky to realize that the potential that it had. I think now, reaping the rewards as well with how big esports is right now as well.
Yeah, it is. And it's always interesting. And, it's one of those things that, sometimes, and I always say to people, it's like the butterfly. Everyone wants to make out like, and so I always say, people want to make out that I'm some sort of like futurist, right? Like, oh man, you must have seen it coming down the pipe early. But you listen to that journey. Yeah, I was around it a lot and I spent lots of years in it. But I was in the right place at the right time. Did that event. Yep, I was brave in doing that event, me and some others. But what I'd say is I went back to, like, for 6 months past that, I didn't get into esports. I was like, that was a cool event. And I was back making surf and snowboard content. But the butterfly effect happens, right? This is the whole thing about saying yes and sliding doors. Is what I wasn't aware of was how much the world and people were like, oh my gosh, like who made content in New Zealand like live? Like people from Australia couldn't believe it, America couldn't believe it. And that was just happening in the ether. And then, of course, that's how things happen, right? People then 6 months later rung up going, you the guy that did the gaming thing? And I was like, yep. And then I was like, this is the real thing. And this is what people, I think when you go out and start things is the whole way through that is quite cushy because you're doing, even garage to a point, you're kind of, what you're doing. Now, when you think about esports that early on, and you think about how much of a pivot that is when people just don't believe that's a real thing. I went home to my wife now, and I said, I'm leaving action sports, I'm leaving this behind, and I'm going to start this company with, another business partner, and that's what I'm going to do. And she obviously fell off her seat going, so what's your plan? I said, I'm going to work from cafes, I'm going to work from home, I'm going to give it all away. And primarily, I'm going to focus on making gaming tournaments. That's what I'm going to do. Mm-hmm. I mean, you think about how ridiculous that must sound. Like, like how brave you would have to be. I don't say I'm brave in that sense, but it's like the conviction, like I never look at it that way in the sense of was I scared or spooked? No, because I was convicted on what I was going to do. So the rest is a byproduct. But when I think about that now, even my wife chuckles, right? You just go, I remember when you came home and told me 7 years ago that you're going to go out in a cafe and you're going to take your laptop, buy a laptop, and you're going to do this gaming. The world hadn't seen any of this stuff, and they're going, you want to put on tournaments to watch other people play video games? How ridiculous. From my wife to my family to people in the community to actual gaming groups to mass media, like everyone thought it was ridiculous. And so that's the conviction, was very much a trust your instincts, and here we are.
It certainly paid off.
I think so.
And sorry, just to touch, so 7 years ago, so you started, you're looking at about 2014, 2015?
Yep, so 2014, I think, was the NZGC, and then 2015 was like LPL was this vehicle, right? Like it's a business of whatever it was going to be, and we're in market as Let's Play Live.
Okay, awesome. And so obviously it's expanding. So LPL, also Let's Play.Live, is now, I think, Australasia's biggest esports organization, which congratulations as well for that, like an incredible achievement.
Thank you. And I always say on that, like with that, I appreciate the kudos. It's like one of those things, everyone had a part, right? Like there's all these great people. I've had people work for me for a day. I've had people working with me for years. Some have come and gone on to better roles. And, to be clear to everyone, whilst someone has to be the driver of the train, or one of the drivers, I think, one of the people I think people forget as well is that, good things happen when you got lots of good people doing good things. And I think the credit has to go to, maybe potentially I had a vision that people bought into, and then it was those who were able to kind of jump on and add that secret herbs and spices, right? Like KFC, I knew how to make a drumstick. They just need to do that. And to your point, it's really awesome, I think, for everyone's work to be sitting here and taking some kudos with that, because when you look at it, like you said, 7 years ago, it's easy to sit here now when you're dealing with the All Blacks and you're on Channel 7 and, in 54 countries around the world. Like, that's the easy bit of the road when everyone's like, awesome, you killed it. But it's for those who believed before, when people didn't want to believe, you know what I mean? Like that's when it's like, man, I believe that vision. And so, so it's a great achievement, I think, just to pay back the faith of those who believed.
Yeah. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is a great example of a humble approach to the humble answer to that question. Also, I'm super excited about LPL. I think it has, obviously you're well aware of the potential it has so much potential. And I kind of wanted to go a bit more into kind of similar work with traditional sports teams. So like the Vodafone Warriors and the New Zealand Breakers as well. I guess, what was the kind of thought process behind that, and how did you essentially bring that into a proper product?
Yeah, so we do that, and so firstly, my background, as I mentioned, I was deeply into sport and was relatively successful on the sporting fields, and so I was always around it, and I was a consumer of sports, right? So I understood that no matter what you think of whether esports is a sport, I never looked at it like that. I just went, sport has massive reach in most markets. NBA is huge. In this country, it was rugby, it's league, it's netball. And so I always realized that they're the stars. If you think about New Zealand stars 10 years ago, the real stars were always the All Blacks and the netballers. That was, and then to a slightly, in my realm, it was the leagueies, like the Warriors, and I grew up as a fan. And so that was what I understood. So the second event I ever did was after NZGC. We come back and I went and did a handshake deal, and it was a handshake deal, no contract, crazy, with Activision. And we're doing Call of Duty as it launched. We did it day and date, and it almost got pulled off air. No one knows that, but they actually almost got pulled off air because of the sporting aspect. So what happened was, I do this deal, I won't name names, domestically. And they were like, yeah, you're good to go. And they were seniors, so they could say that. And they go, you just go hard. So we got Sky ready to go. We start building the hype. We start getting out there and doing the get involved with Call of Duty League, best of the best play. I wanted to kind of normalize it because we're getting a bit of traction and people were interested. I wanted to normalize it to the media. And I felt that because what I knew was that, and we all know now, that everyone's playing games. But the world had this stereotype. And I was like, man, I'm telling you, I met Manu Vatave. I met all these boys like Jazz Tavanga and the like. They all play Call of Duty. Like they're they tell me this themselves. They're playing 16. So I was like, what we're going to do is try to open the veil. So I walk into the Warriors. I drive out there to Mount Smart myself with a suit, knock on the door, ask whether I could speak to Jim Doyle. And Jim Doyle took my meeting, which, respectfully to him, he's like, who are you kind of thing, but he took my meeting. And I said to him, this is what I'm trying to do. It's going to be on Sky. Your guys play a lot of games, and it'll be great if you could get the Warriors to be involved, and we'll make them a captain of every team. Can you do that for me? And he ultimately looked at me and appreciated that I was just a guy trying, and somewhat of an entrepreneur. And he was just like, I'll ask the guys if they like gaming, I will help you out. If they don't, then I can't make them do that. He rang me back, and for those who don't know Jim Doyle was the CEO of the Vodafone Warriors, and he would go on to work at the NRL, and he's already a multi-millionaire who'd sold out and was worth, I think, close to $50 or $100 million. So this is a guy who's very, very well respected.
Yep.
And he said, and so he did, true to his word, he rang me back and said, yes, I'll give you the Warriors. I'll give you 8 of the boys. And I said, thank you so much. I'll look after them. They came on, and that was the start of the journey. So before anyone talked about, and I'm talking around the world, any of this happening, Australia, any other brand or whatever, we had done that deal. And the Vodafone Warriors, if you look back on Call of Duty, in about 2015, the Vodafone Warriors were part of that tournament. And that was really cool to open it up. It almost got me pulled off air, to my point about about the fact that it got so big because the Warriors are turning up in the media, that Activision in the US called and said, what's going on down there in New Zealand? Like, who are these guys of this kind of sporting group? And they wanted to stop it. No one knows that. But we managed to get through, and that's how it kind of, and I saw the unveiling of that. And then I just want to touch on a point there then. Jim didn't need money. The Warriors don't need money, but always honor, don't be a taker. I always say to people, don't be a taker, right? Like, I took from them because I wanted something for their value. But what I did is I asked the reception, I said, I don't have any money. Jim Doyle's not going to need my money, but what is he into? She said, look, Jim Doyle is because you can't give him an Xbox or you can't give him a PlayStation because that's not his cup, And she goes, he's into wine. And she said, funny enough, his favorite wine's $24 and something like that, $27. She said, if you got him a couple of those, he'll be wrapped. So I went there, walked back in afterwards and just gave it to Jim and said, I really appreciate, you letting me get the boys over the line. Thanks heaps, gave him that wine. Now, I didn't have to. No one had to do it. It was almost a business to business, but I think that was the right thing to do. And I made sure the boys got a couple of PlayStation, that stuff through PlayStation for their time. And just to be like, there you go. So everyone was happy. Now, years later, Jim Doyle rang me up when he was at the NRL. And that's how LPL ended up doing the NRL Fortnite event outside of ANZ Stadium, where we built, the huge 50-person Fortnite apparatus outside ANZ Stadium. And it all starts from that story. Jim always respected that, that I was honourable and we had a working relationship. And even though I hadn't heard from him for a couple of years, he was the one who rang me from the NRL and said, we want you guys to be the ones who do the gaming activation for us. And so I just say to people, that's the full circle of paying it forward, make sure you're respectful in your business. And that kind of kicked off the way forward with almost every other brand we've worked with.
Yeah, that's real smart as well. Like that going beyond as well, like with the wine and finding out kind of what he likes and actually, and then paying it forward. Great. Go down. I think it kind of also speaks to your person as well, your values and that. Okay. I guess essentially, just a final few questions. I'd love to go into LPL more, but I guess for that, as the director, what does a usual day for you look like for LPL?
Look, and it's a good day to talk about it. Is we go to a lot, we're talking about broadcasting give or take 6 nights a week now, 6 or 7 nights. We're pretty much full-time delivering some form of gaming content, whether it's one of our pro leagues or secondary leagues or bespoke projects. We are broadcasting, and we're now in about 55 countries worldwide, I think, give or take, last time we looked. So we're going all the time like a network, which is really cool. But you look at what happened last night, we're sitting there, it's 6 p.m., the government locks us into a 7-day snap lockdown. And that's a good example. I mean, that's pretty extreme, but the reality is every day is really different. My job is to make sure that the team are motivated. I think that's the big thing about being a leader is they want to see the vision. They want to have a blueprint of what they're doing, good and bad. And my job is really entailed on overall touching on not being an expert in everything now. It's become too kind of big in that regard, but just kind of like what's happening in broadcast. Are we all good over here? Are we good from a commercial point of view and business to business? Are we good at a people level? And then primarily the rest of my day is built out on new projects, bigger projects, that whether it's a network, whether it's building some new equipment. And now we've become a lot more global in what we're doing. It's not just New Zealand. So we're really focused on Australia this year, and we're really focused on Asia and the US. So that's where the evolution is. So my day-to-day is always different in summary, but I get to the office around 7:30, and then my day probably finishes around 7 o'clock. But you're never really off, because we broadcast 24 hours a day. You just never know what's going to happen. So I just wake up and try to be diligent and always want to be set a good standard for my team. But that doesn't necessarily need to be hours. I've learned that in the early days it was hours. Now it's about output and making sure that everyone feels like they're contributing in a way. And I think that's part of the best thing I can do from my day-to-day and giving back to the team is make sure that they have clear understanding, but do not micromanage. Let people be like do you, and you do the best you can do. And as long as you know sort of relatively what the task is and how we're going to get there, and we're buying into a vision, that could be a broadcast. We're going to do a super amazing broadcast tonight because it's CSGO Pro Night. That's where the teams all buy into that and make sure we deliver. Everybody's got to be on the same page. And my job is really make sure, are we good? And then it trickles all the way down. So that's kind of my day-to-day.
That sounds incredible. Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, 24 hours a day, you'd never be off.
Never.
Big days and never.
Yeah, right now, like last night was 6 o'clock. We got a lockdown. We've got 3 hours to kind of get everything prepped across. We've got a broadcast already starting at like 8 o'clock at night till midnight. Get up this morning. Got to get the team ready as far as because everyone's online now. Got meetings across the globe, so we're here and having these conversations. And if someone wants to chat, usually the US is somewhere between 5 and 8 in the morning for me, 5 a.m. to 8 a.m. And if it's Malaysia, it's usually like 7 o'clock at night. And then of course Australia, New Zealand. So yeah, now it's become you're never off, right? That's the thing. So it's sort of it's your reward for people wanting to do business with you, good and bad.
Yeah, no, yeah, it definitely have its perks and its downsides.
Yeah.
Awesome. I guess just to wrap up, are there any other kind of upcoming projects that you'd like to shout out that you want people to our listeners to kind of go find you, go kind of participate in anything?
Look, I think there's always content to watch from LPL. There's tournaments. Look, for those who like our stuff, and thank them for being involved. That's what I'd say. So, we appreciate the support, and we're out there doing the best we can for New Zealanders and for gamers, whether they're consumers or whether they want to play. That's the first thing I say. Thank you to them. And for those who are sort of just listening to this for the first time, want to kind of get involved, it's worth getting involved. Our job is really to give you pathways to many different things. So we have projects coming up with the All Blacks later on the month. We have projects with supercars, if that's your kind of cup of tea, and other, streams with Kings and Jimmy Jackson coming up. So there's a lot of kind of that celebrity kind of crossover projects coming up. And then we also have our core stuff, our pro leagues with the best players. But we also have grassroots, that we always are really open to making sure that people can find our content accessibly, or if you want to play, jump onto the platform and work your way up. And there's been some great stories of people that have just jumped on casually, either as a team or by themselves, and gone on to get to the highest levels of our tournaments and then beyond. So so there's lots going on, and if people are into it, then I think they should just come check it out, and hopefully myself and the team do a good job of keeping you happy and keeping you involved. And that's all we can do.
Awesome. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening, Mr. Duane Mutu. Appreciate your time as well. Thank you very much, guys. And we'll see you in the next episode.